Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nimhauser, and it is not the morning. And this is a practice report, but it's not my practice report. I did not make the trip over to Green Bay, but the man, the myth, Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times, he did. I'm not sure he had the choice of whether he was going to do it or not, but he's there. Bob, how are you doing, man?
Not too bad. Yeah, I like Green Bay. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of grown on me. I think this is like the ninth time we've been here since I took over the beat in 2013. Believe it or not, between playoff games and preseason games and all that. So yeah, it's not so bad.
Yeah, I think Green Bay this time of year especially is super underrated. There's a pretty fun area around the stadium, around Lambeau Field, and some good bars and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, and it's really growing. And in fact, I could show you real fast.
Yeah.
That's how close I am to Lambeau Field. It's just like 1,000 yards, or 1,000 feet away to like that main gate there. And this is a brand new like 3-story establishment here, and I just walked here like 5 minutes from where the practice field was and all that. So they're really building up the area around here. They're trying to make this like a 24/7, 365 kind of destination, and not just simply for the Packer games. But so for Packer games, for sure, this is a fun area.
Well, I mean, that seems to be the new financial model for a lot of the NFL teams, trying to build like an entire mini city around their stadium to just have it be a real district. The real important question, Bob, and the hard hitting one I got to start with is: Did you ride a kid's bike over to this bar?
Yeah. Yeah. I did. I did not, but yeah, it was fun watching those guys do that. For sure, that's kind of one of the traditions here that sort of dates back to somewhere in the mid to late '50s, and yeah, you do get a feel for. I've been here for games before, and I knew where their practice field was, but I'd never seen a practice here. So it makes a lot more sense when you kind of see it in that light. That the practice field is basically across the street from Lambeau Field, and so the locker rooms are in Lambeau Field and kind of up. There's a tiny bit of a hill there, and so it kind of started with that the kids would offer bikes to dudes to kind of go down the hill a little bit and get to practice that way. So I'd say about a third of the Seahawks maybe did that. They also offer golf carts and stuff like that. So some of the guys took golf carts. Devin Witherspoon, I saw, was driving about half the secondary in one golf cart, and some guys just walked. Some guys just walked it. There was a bunch of fans lining each side, and the guys were signing autographs and taking pictures and stuff like that. So yeah, so it was kind of a fun way to enter practice. It probably gets a little old if you have to do it every single day, maybe like the Packers do. But it's certainly, I think the Seahawks liked it, doing it once for sure.
The image of Devin Witherspoon behind the wheel of a golf cart gives me Marshawn Lynch at Cal vibes. Was he was he driving that thing straight?
It wasn't quite that. It wasn't quite that, but it was noticeable. You always hear Witherspoon basically anywhere in wherever he is, and he definitely I can't remember exactly what it was he said, but he did say something like hey, I'm coming through, or something like that. He made it clear that he was driving driving the golf cart, and I know Kobe Bryant and a couple other guys, but.
So this is a practice only tradition. So this is the first time you've seen this particular tradition there.
Yeah, it's just a practice thing. Yeah, they have in the old days, it was a grass field. Apparently, it was just across the street, and that's where they started practicing. And now it's where they built the Don Hutson Center, so their indoor facility is on the same plot of land, and there's actually practice fields both in front and behind the Don Hutson Center. I mean, they've got a lot of space here. The Seahawks do too. Obviously, the Seahawks have 3 full fields, and it's about the same size as the VMAC essentially, but it's on a plot of land that's across the street from Lambeau Field, so that's where you got to go to get to it. But they don't have separate locker rooms in there basically, so their locker rooms are still in the football facility or in the football field.
And we're talking to Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times. So Bob, this was a public practice. Fans were available to be there. Yes,
it was. Yeah, it was their last public practice, and they have stands set up and everything. So, so there was probably about the same amount of people as you'd see at a Seahawk open practice. yeah, they had, like I say, stands were set up on one side, and then there was just a whole bunch of other people lining the other part of the field, and all that. So yeah, they get they get and it was, like I said, it was their final open practice of the year. Well, just like the Seahawks have theirs final open one the other day.
What's the atmosphere like there? How does it compare to, the VMAC and the open practices there?
I mean, it felt really comparable. Obviously, there was probably a little more excitement because they were going against another team. I would imagine that the VMAC would be pretty hyped up too. The crowd there, if they had the Kansas City Chiefs coming in, they had the Green Bay Packers coming in for a joint practice. So I think it was definitely fun for people to see, Cooper Kupp and Sam Darnold and kind of the guys like that everybody sort of knew and that have played Green Bay quite a bit through the years. So. Yeah, but it was fun. Real similar in nature, with music playing and all that kind of stuff, lots of cheering when the Packers made plays for sure.
The only time I was in Green Bay, it was very clear to me that Packers fans hold the Seahawks in a special category, even though they're not in the same division. There's certainly been some memorable games between the two. Did you get any sense of, lingering animosity from Packer fans towards Seahawks?
I mean, I really didn't converse much with fans, so I can't necessarily say that. But you're right. I mean, it is kind of, we were talking about that, about like how little I like how little crossover there's been between, say, the Seahawks and the Detroit Lions or something through the years, other until the past couple of years when it seemed like they played every time. But yeah, and the Seahawks in Green Bay, they've played 3 or 4 times in the playoffs, a couple of very memorable games. Obviously, for a while, it just seemed like they were playing all the time in the regular season too. And I think maybe the Mike Holmgren connection kind of helped kick that off there during the 2000s as well with some of that. So for sure, it's been an interesting series. But yeah, I can't say I felt any animosity or anything, but certainly there was a lot of interest in the practice today.
Yeah, and it sounded, I'm going to ask you a second, just open stuff about the practice itself. But the other thing that didn't occur to me till I heard Sam Darnold's comments afterwards is he's played the Packers quite a bit, especially last year, being in the division, and so he had some familiarity. Were there any other connections? I mean, MVS would be another one. Any other connections?
Yeah. I mean, and I saw him. He got he actually was one of the last guys to kind of go through the line with the bike, and he got a lot of attention for sure because he was a guy that everybody knew and all that. So I saw him kind of running the fan gauntlet there on his way to the field. So not a ton other than front office. I know John Schneider, the general manager, likes coming back here. I think he had I think there was some Schneider family members here today and things like that, and he kind of gets to hang out with them for a couple of days since they have the couple of days here.
Yeah, I wonder, did he come to the joint practice last year in Nashville?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, they move the whole operation when they do that stuff. So everybody is there for all that, for all these. But I mean, that one was even a little more intense because they were there for 2 joint practices plus then an off day. I mean, they were essentially there 4 full days. I think this one's kind of cut shorter by a day, obviously, because they're only doing 1 day of a joint practice.
All right, well, let's get into the practice itself. From all the messages I saw on Twitter, it seemed like a lively practice. How would you describe the practice that you witnessed, Bob?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it seems like every time you watch an ESPN highlight of a joint practice, there's a scuffle or two. So there definitely were some scuffles. Nothing really rose to the level of helmet swinging or anything like that. So I didn't. Nothing seemed too out of the ordinary, but there definitely was some. There was a brief about 5-minute period in the middle of it when there were basically three scraps, and there was one. And it was, and you may see diverging reports about this because I will note, not to complain, but it was really hard to watch from our standpoint because we had to just try to find spots in this one little area on the sidelines, and oftentimes we were behind players. We weren't allowed to be like up in the stands where some of the fans were. Some of the video you've seen, I think, is from fans who shot it from the other side of the field who were sitting in the stands. So it was a little bit chaotic being down there on the sidelines and trying to figure out what was going on all the time. But there was a brief about 5-minute period when when I know me and Brady Henderson and Michael Sandugar, I think, were all watching the Seahawks offense against the Vikings, or I mean, the Packers defense on one side of the field, and on the other side of the field was the opposite. We're going at each other, which is part of why they like joint practices as well. They can all kind of work at once, kind of thing. So we saw a scuffle on the offensive side. Ken Walker ran in for a touchdown. It appeared Quay Walker kind of hit him as he went through, as he hit the line. I think maybe Ken Walker thought that was unnecessary. Kind of looked like Anthony Bradford came over to defend him, and then a million people came rushing in, and that became this big mass of bodies. And literally, maybe that lasted 45 seconds. Right as I was getting done, suddenly we heard this big commotion on the other side of the field, and that was where I think the video that you might have seen of Ernest Jones and Zach Tom, I think it was, for Green Bay, and I think Devin Witherspoon was involved in that as well, kind of getting into it. So we all kind of turned, and even it was funny because some of the players the players on our end all suddenly turned around and was like, man, what's going on over there? And there were two kind of in the span of about 3 or 4 plays on that side of the field, and we all went running down there to kind of catch up on what was going down there. So there was a brief, like I say, 3 to 5 minute period when I think there was about 3 scuffles kind of that all happened at once. So it made it feel like there was a lot. But after that, it kind of calmed down, and there really wasn't anything more. And then afterward, it was kind of weird just because they did a big, both coaches and all the players got together in the middle of the field and looked like they all shook hands and, hey, good job. Maybe we'll see in the NFC title game or whatever it is they said. And the Seahawks went off to their side of the field, and the Packers were going off on their side, except there was about 10 players who kind of kept milling about in the middle of the field. And I know Ken Walker was one of them. And so it seemed like a couple of the players who'd been involved in these other things were still kind of going at it. And a few of the Packer players came over to the Seahawks sidelines. And nothing rose above the level of just kind of yelling at each other during that, because most of the players had their helmets off and everything. So if they had thrown punches at that point, they might have actually done actual damage. So nobody did anything then. And I saw coaches and trainers kind of quickly get involved. But it was interesting. There were definitely 3 or 4 players on each side that I think kind of left with a little bit of lingering resentments. But most of the players just kind of walked off and, realized it was all done by then.
Yeah, I think I heard Leonard Williams say he didn't really appreciate that they were coming over to their
He was
sideline.
one that we got to talk to. But Leonard was kind of funny because he was kind of just standing over there, and he wasn't like yelling at anybody until the guys came over to yell at him. And then he pointed at a couple of Packers, and he was just like, "Who are you anyway?" kind of to this one guy, because like I think it was a rookie that I think he was like, "Why are you even yelling at him?" So, yeah, it's so for better or worse, these things kind of happen in there. Mike McDonald didn't seem too concerned about any of it afterwards. So I think it's just kind of one of those boys will be boys kind of things.
So, it was hard to kind of tell from the tweets that I was reading. It seemed to some extent like the Seahawks offense had some pretty good moments and the Seahawks defense had some pretty good moments, but it also seemed like the Packers had some pretty good moments. How would you was there a winner in this practice, like one side of the ball or one team looking better than the other?
Well, like I say, it was from all our varying vantage points, it was hard to get that overall sense, because you sort of had to pick one thing or the other to watch.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it was, so nobody was able to watch everything all at once kind of thing. And like McDonald told us just afterward, he was just with the Seahawks defense the whole time, which was kind of on another side of the field. And so he was just kind of telling us, he'd heard some things about the offense, but he hadn't seen any of it, and he was going to go watch the film. So, but yeah, for sure. The field was kind of wet, and so for the first 10 or 15 minutes, the Seahawks were kind of just slipping everywhere as well. So it took them a little while to both literally and figuratively, I think, kind of find their footing. I didn't really see the defensive series that people were talking about that was really good, that McDonald talked about when Jordan Love. I was actually kind of watching stuff on the other end, but there was the 7-on-7 series that was the only thing Jordan Love really did. And I know all the Packer guys had him going 3 of 12, with the Seahawks having 3 or 4 pass breakups. I know Shaquille Griffin had one of those. So it sounded like that was a really good series for the Seattle defense. But they did give up, but the one thing all of us could watch was at the end, they did a 2-minute drill for each of the Seahawks the Seahawks first and second team offense and the Green Bay first and second team offense, then did a series against, the other team's first and second team defense of a 2-minute drill. And the Seahawks first team defense gave up like a 18-yard pass on a 4th and 12 or whatever that allowed the Green Bay offense to get into field goal range. And so I assume they kind of won that drill. And then the Seattle first team offense, Darnold threw an interception, and there's video of that out there that was about a 40-yard just kind of heave on what was a 3rd and long, that it looked like there was a holding penalty apparently right before that moved him back. So but I mean, that's one series, so I don't draw huge conclusions from one series of plays for either side of the ball. When I did watch a full Darnold, the number one offense in a red zone drill, he looked great in the part I saw, and that included the Ken Walker TD run. But another thing I know there's video out there of is what I thought was the play of the day. Of what I saw was the Elijah Arroyo left-handed, one-handed leaping grab that was just on a bullet from Darnold, kind of between the defense, and he had thrown a touchdown to Smith and Jigba right before that, and he threw one to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who I know has kind of been the invisible man, but he threw a touchdown pass to him on the play right after that. So yeah, they had a really good, the number one offense had a really good session there. So that's kind of how these things go. There's kind of good and bad plays for both.
That's of note that MVS had a touchdown. I mean, the practice here on, what was it, Tuesday before they left, he had, from what I could recall, his best practice, actually made some reasonably large plays. So it sounds like, at least for that play, it continued a decent practice for MVS.
Yeah, I mean, he was out there with, pretty consistently with the ones, because Torrey Horton, again, sat out. So, I mean, typically when they went 3 receivers, he was the 3rd receiver. So, yeah, that's the only catch I can think of off the top of my head that he made. But he did. I mean, again, this was red zone, so it was like a 10-yard reception, but if that. But yeah, he was out there consistently for sure with the ones in that regard. And yeah, we don't McDonald didn't have any real specific update on Torrey Horton, other than they're just kind of trying to let it heal. But that might be a reason they need to keep Valdez-Scantling. I mean, he's been pretty durable for the most part in his career. I mean, he's played a lot of games in the NFL, and so if you don't know exactly what Torrey Horton's status might be, that could influence things a little bit.
Yeah, when you had the training camp that MVS has had, a 10-yard reception is welcome, because there haven't even been a lot of those, though, from what I've seen, Bob. So we're talking to Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times about the joint practice with the Seahawks and the Packers. So it also sounded like there's quite a day for JSN. The Packers reporters seemed to be talking a lot about, like, my God, we cannot stop this guy. Yeah,
he did. Yeah. Yeah, again, that was that was one of the red zone sessions, or what, the 7-on-7 sessions. I'm sorry, it was a 7-on-7 session, and I was watching the other end of the ball during that one as well. But yeah, he definitely had a good one, a good session during that. And then I did see him catch a couple of touchdowns in the session I was just talking about a little while ago. And then he had a catch in one of the 11-on-11 sessions for sure. And then he was the intended target on the pass at the end that was picked off. So I guess it wasn't like he was completely unstoppable. But that was Darnold was just kind of trying to make something happen there, because I think there was 15 or 20 seconds on the clock was the scenario. So, and it was 3rd and long. So he was kind of just trying to make something happen. But yeah, I mean, no secret that Jackson Smith and Jigba is, he's going to be a key part of this team. So when they come to something like this, he's definitely a guy they're going to get involved. So he did have a good day.
And this was a fully padded practice, correct?
Yeah, full pads, but they don't tackle to the ground, but there's full contact. I mean, there's definite a lot of hitting, and that's part of what leads to some of the, Darnold was kind of talking about that. Some of the scuffling becomes a little bit because of guys. The rules can be incomplete sometimes on when a play is dead. Guys sometimes just take offense to whether a play is dead or not. But yeah, so there's no to the ground tackling, but it was full pads and full contact.
And there was a player that has not been there all the time for practices, whether there's pads or not. Ken Walker participated, as you kind of mentioned. Did he participate fully? How did that look?
As far as I could tell, he was full. Yeah. And it seemed like generally when the first team offense, every time they began a new drill or a new series or whatever, it seemed like he was usually the first running back up, and then Charbonnet would rotate in with him, and then Helani got some reps as well with the first team offense. But yeah, he looked good. I saw him. I talked the touchdown run I talked about earlier, but he definitely had some. They did kind of a running drill early in practice, and he definitely took some runs during that, and he looked good to me. I haven't thought. I thought every time he's been out there, he's looked good. He just hasn't been out there all the time. So I think that's sort of been the thing. Is just I think they might have liked to have seen him out there a little more. But at this point, they've gotten through the full contact period, kind of the big hitting things they're going to do during training camp. So, theoretically at this point, there shouldn't be anything he really gets on harm's way with. So it looks like he should be ready to go week 1, unless something happens between now and then. But it won't happen because they got another full contact practice or something.
One of the biggest stories so far preseason, and I think camp, has been the Seahawks offensive line looking much more competent than it has in previous years. How did it look in this practice? I think I heard there was some pressure, but, did you get a feel for where that pressure was coming from, whether it was the first team offensive line and kind of how the offensive line looked?
Well, it's definitely, I would definitely say, just without, again, being able to kind of look at everything, I thought there was a little more pressure on Sam Darnold in this than there. I mean, he only played 5 plays the other day, or whatever, or 10 plays the other day, only 4 passes. So there was a little more. I thought there was a little more pressure overall, and it's hard to get it was hard to get a sense of the running game because they're just like running some plays here and there. So it's not like you see it kind of back up like that. I thought it looked okay for what I saw. I would definitely say when Drew Lock was out there was a little more pressure. Off the top of my head, I can think of 3 or 4 times it seemed like Drew was sort of running for his life out there a little bit. But again, they're far more than you see in preseason games. When you come to joint practices, teams are throwing stuff at you as well. They're throwing blitzes and stuff at you far more than they do in preseason games because here they're more willing to do stuff like that because they want to practice it in a setting like this where it's not a game that's on TV that the rest of the NFL can see. So you do get some more exotic looks and things like that and things like this. So I think there were a few times when there was some of that, I think for both teams, but definitely some of that for sure for the Seahawks when I think, there might have been some leakage that we haven't seen in the preseason games, in part because the other teams aren't trying this stuff in preseason games.
Is it? I think I saw that Oluwatimi practiced today and also got some reps with the ones. Is that right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he was out there in pads, and again, it appeared to me that every time the number 1 offense took the field for the first time, that Jalen Sundell was the center. And McDonald said afterward that he's running with the ones right now, but Oluwatimi for sure got some snaps with the ones. He rotated in and did get some snaps with the ones, and it seemed like he got quite a few snaps. So I don't know if he was on any kind of a snap count that they were keeping track of at all, but he definitely got a decent share of snaps. It sounds like nobody who's considered a starter kind of thing is going to play Saturday. So I don't know if they have all the evidence now that they need to make the decisions there. But I mean, just based on what we saw, I think right now, you'd go with the Jalen Sundell is going to be the starting center against the 49ers.
Yeah. So that's a savvy interpretation. So if we see Oluwatimi play on Saturday, that's probably a pretty good sign that Jalen Sundell's locked up the job.
Yeah, although it would surprise me that he would play because they're going to play Jalen Milroe the whole game. I mean, Mike McDonald said that afterward, and I think they'll probably keep him with the centers he's been playing with. And I recall very few snaps that Jalen Milroe's had with either Sundell or Oluwatimi because those guys have always been with the 1 or the 2 centers, and Milroe's always sort of worked with the 3s essentially, and Federico Marengas largely as his center, and typically you kind of stick with that. If they want to give Jalen Milroe his best opportunity, you're going to keep him playing with the people he's comfortable with. So I would be surprised if any of the people they kind of consider their top 8 or 9 offensive linemen, the guys you're probably penciling in already as being active for the first game, would play in the preseason game.
Yeah, curious. When Mike McDonald said his starters aren't going to play, what do you think that means? Does it include do you think like Nick Eamon-Worry, some of the rookies that might benefit from additional snaps, you think even those guys will sit out? How are you interpreting that or expecting for that game?
Well, again, that's where it becomes, though, if you just throw a guy out, but he's not playing with all the people he's been playing and practicing with the whole time. I mean, what kind of evaluation is that? Because, so much is based on communication and the guy next to, knowing where the people are lining up with you with. So that's why a lot of times you don't do that, even if a guy like that maybe could use some snaps. Even where he certainly got a ton of snaps today. So, I know he hasn't played a ton in the 2 preseason games, but he probably got 3 times the snaps he got in the preseason games today, going against obviously, a good team in the Green Bay Packers. So I don't know if there really would be that much for him to gain if he's just suddenly stuck him out there with the number 3 defense to play a lot, but maybe they would. Maybe he does sometimes roll in and practice with those guys, so maybe he would. Rookies that might play a lot would be the only guys I would think might play in the preseason game. I would think just about anybody else who's kind of a veteran and is assured a spot on the 53-man roster. I wouldn't think those guys would play Saturday, because I think those are the guys that you would not be wanting to risk get hurt. So yes, and other than a rookie, I would think if you saw anybody playing in the game Saturday, it would mean they are at least on the bubble for a roster spot.
One of the other things, Bob, a couple other questions, and I'll let you get on to your evening. So the Seahawks played the Packers last year. The Packers ran all over them, at least in the first half of that game. And obviously Jordan Love didn't play much today, only in 7v7s. Did you get a sense of, I know you weren't able to see everything, but how the defense held up? Was there any pass pressure? Was there like decent run defense? Anything about how the front held up against the Packers?
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say it played a lot better than it did in the first half of that game last year. Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely held its own physically in that regard. And my sense always was that first half they just didn't play well. I didn't necessarily think there was that big of a gap if you went back through it between the Packers and the Seahawks, as it looked like on that night that it did. But certainly I think that was evened out today. I think the Seahawks defense definitely sort of held its own when they played them today, for sure, even when they were going 1v1s.
Was there any player that stood out on defense that you noticed?
That's a good question. I mean, Shaquille Griffin was who caught everybody's eye, simply because we've been kind of wondering where he stands and things. He made 2 or 3 plays. He had a play in the final 2-minute drill as well, where when he was with the twos, but he broke up a pass in that. As a starter, a guy that stood out to me was Derek Hall. I can definitely think of a couple plays Derek Hall made that getting pressure. And again, they're not hitting the quarterback, so you can get pressure and you're not going to actually hit him. But then they usually let the play continue. So, but I saw him get through a couple times for sure. I mean, Devin Witherspoon is always just impossible not to notice. So,
Yeah.
sort of noticed him everywhere. I am off the top of my head remembering a pass breakup he had in one of the later 11-on-11 sessions as well.
All right, last thing. I think there seemed to be a little bit of news in the Mike McDonald press conference. Sounds like Tyrese Knight has got some good news, and we heard that Jalen Milroe playing the full game, and nothing really new about Torrey Horton, but the Tyrese Knight news seemed important.
Yeah, I mean, he said again they've been purposely vague on what the medical issue is, because it sounds like it's something they want to keep that private, and that's not really a football related. I mean, it's football related, and they can keep him off the field, but it's not something that happened on the football field. So, so it's they've been kind of vague about exactly what that is. But he said today that they got good news concerning that, and so that it sounds like they can begin the process of him getting back to practicing. So he's been out for a couple of weeks. He had the knee thing is what basically hasn't practiced since the day the knee thing happened, because he was out, and then this other thing crept up, it sounds like. So it's been about 2.5 weeks or so since he's done anything. So sounds like he may need a tiny bit of time to kind of work his way in, but with 2 weeks to go to the today's Thursday as well, so basically 2.5 weeks really before you play that first game. It certainly sounds like it's realistic to think he could be available for that first game.
And you always wonder about injuries in these joint practices. It sounds like Mike Morris was maybe the only guy that got dinged up.
I mean, that was the only one I saw. I don't know if anybody else reported anything else, but nobody else asked about anything else. We saw Morris sort of getting looked at and attended to on the sidelines, and McDonald just said they're evaluating him now, and so they probably know more later on that.
Did you happen to see what happened? Was it a leg, arm?
No, I didn't see it happen.
Yeah.
I just suddenly saw him on the sidelines, them looking at him. So it was maybe about midway through practice. So he definitely had been out there doing some stuff before it happened.
All right, Bob, are you sticking around for this game, or are you heading home beforehand?
No, I got to leave tomorrow. Yeah, actually not. I'm staying for I normally would stay for the game. Actually, I have a family commitment essentially. So I'm not sticking around for the game, but we will have full coverage in the Seattle Times. We're hiring somebody here to cover it for us, but it'll be fun, for sure, to see Jalen Milroe play a whole game. That'll be interesting to people for sure.
All right, Bob, safe travels, man, and thank you so much for giving us a report on what happened there.
Sure. Yeah, anytime.
All right, that is Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times. Make sure you check out all the stuff. I read Bob every single morning. Every morning, I start my day by reading the Seattle Times. I read the sports page. And yes, even though I'm at the practices and I'm at the games, I still am always interested in Bob's perspective. He's been doing this forever and is as pure of a beat writer as you're going to find out there. He just tells you what he saw. He's not going to get in there and editorialize that much because that's not the job. He's not writing a column. He's writing for the beat. And he often notices things I don't, or he sees something a different way than I do. And so it's always great. I've learned a ton from him, even in just the short time I've been hanging around those guys that actually know what they're doing on the beat. So really cool of him to take time out of his day and update us for what was a pretty eventful practice. And based on everything, I tried to get a Packers beat guy on the show as well. Couldn't connect in time with anybody that's at least responded so far. But from what I could see, it really looks like the Seahawks offense had some really good moments. The Seahawks defense had some really good moments, and the Packers got him a few times. Like the Packers offense got him a few times, and the Packers defense got I generally, the interpretation I'm getting from it is JSN had maybe the player of the day kind of practice. The highlight of the day was Elijah Arroyo's one-handed catch. It sounds like the Packers tight ends had some decent days against the Seahawks. And so, there's that. Evan Williams, the safety for the Packers, makes that last-ditch interception in the team drill. So that's going to get a lot of pub. But to Bob's point, that was a 3rd and long, 15 seconds to go kind of desperation heave. And by the way, on that play, JSN had clearly beaten his man. So I think part of the reason Sam Darnold underthrew that ball is there was pressure in his lap from what I could see on that play. So I don't know. I will take from afar and with Bob's insights, as well as what I've read across a bunch of Packers reporters and a bunch of Seahawks reporters, this was pretty encouraging that it seems like we are continuing to see more of what we already saw. And we're adding to that Kenneth Walker practicing fully in pads and being productive and dangerous. And that the offensive line held up reasonably well. And from what Bob said, the defense, which did struggle quite a bit against the Packers, especially their offensive line, especially the run game last year in Seattle, sounds like they had a better go of it in this. So all that is welcome news. And the most welcome news of all came out of it what seems to be pretty healthy. And that's we all know that for all the things that matter in the NFL, attrition is just the silent killer of hopes and dreams. And so, you just kind of hold your breath, hope that they get what they need out of it and don't get anything negative. It sounds like mostly that's the case. We'll find out if anything serious happens with Mike Morris. Hopefully not. Sounds like Tyrese Knight is coming back and will be available to be your starter, which is important news. I think he is significantly better of a player than what we've seen from the players behind him at that position. So yeah, now it just turns into, let's see what the back end of the roster can do on Saturday. You're not going to see any of the starters. You're probably not going to see a lot of guys that you think might even be quote backups. It just depends. You're not going to see Drew Lock, right? Because Jalen Milroe is going to be out there. So you very well could see third string for the entire game. And I'm looking forward to it personally. So I will be hosting a watch party on Saturday. That'll start right at game time, which I think is 2:00 Pacific. I forget, but I'll put it up on YouTube. If you haven't already, subscribed, and click the bell on YouTube, do that now so you'll always get notified when I go live. Today, folks, I really wanted to do a morning show. I have all these things I wanted to talk to you about. It's been a very hectic day for me, so I have not been able to get that all squared away. I had this as my backup plan of if I can't do a morning show, we'll do an afternoon. I'll grab one of the guys, hopefully, and we can talk about a practice report. I thought that was great. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I certainly appreciated that Bob was able to do it. And Saturday morning, by the way, we're going to have a really fun Seahawks Saturday. 9 a.m. will be Jeff Simmons. 10 a.m. on an extended Seahawks Saturday, I'm having a special guest. Quite possibly, not even possibly, this was my number one guest I wanted to have on this show forever. And finally was able to connect, finally able to arrange it. So I'm not going to tell you who. You're just going to have to be there and tune in, but it's going to be a lot of fun on Saturday. We're going to have that in the morning. Then we're going to have the watch party in the afternoon. Tomorrow, I have some ideas on some shows. I've got actually a bunch of ideas. So tomorrow's going to be a fun thing. Although I do have golf in the morning. Mike Sando and I are going to go hit the links. So it depends. I might do a 7 a.m. show. That's a possibility. Or I may do a afternoon show. So again, make sure you click the bell to get notified. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. All that stuff would be greatly appreciated and help you stay in tune. And also, if you haven't followed us on Instagram, take a second and follow us on Instagram. We are closing in on 10,000 followers there. We're closing in on 25,000 subscribers here. If we either get to 25K on YouTube or 10K on Instagram, I'll be giving away tickets to the 49ers versus Seahawks game in week 1, which, man, it could be a special game. Also, if we do both of those things, I will give away additional tickets to that game because I want as many Seahawks fans in the seats as possible. I'm seeing a lot of good activity on hbtix.com, HBTIX. Go over there, get tickets for this 49ers game. There are a bunch up there. If you are a patron at patreon.com/hawkblogger, it's going to verify you so people know that you are a actual Seahawks fan, because it's unlikely that other fans like 49ers fans are going to pay to be a part of our community. So consider joining at patreon.com/hawkblogger. Also head over to HBTix to get your tickets or list your tickets. Let's get as many Seahawks fans in there as possible. Make sure you follow the best practices, the recommendations I've put on there to make sure, you avoid scams, you protect yourself, and you verify if you're selling your tickets. Make sure you're selling them to a Seahawks fan. I've given you some ideas on how to make sure that happens. All right. I think there was one other thing before I let you guys go. I don't see any super chat, so I don't need to get to that. I don't know. I think we'll call that good. I think we'll call that good. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful Thursday. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Until then, have a great one. I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings.